Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is a special presentation. I'm sure many of you have heard the recent announcement that Wizards is ending their partnership with Judge Academy. Today, I'll be talking about what that means for judges and what a path forward might look like. Whenever I write a question for this channel, I always strive to present the minimum working example of that problem. That is, the version of the question that showcases the interaction with the least amount of complexity. Such minimal working examples make it easier to understand what's going on by stripping away the unnecessary details and allowing people to focus on just what's essential. Today, I'll be talking about what, in my opinion, constitutes the minimal working example of the judge program. If, for some reason, you're going to start the program completely from scratch, what would it, or should, it look like? What is its very essence? Ready? Let's get started. So, before Judge Academy, there was the judge program. It didn't really have an official name or a structure as a standalone legal entity. A handful of judges did have some sort of a contract with Wizards to act as the program's leadership and various other special roles, but the vast majority of judges were just people who were interested in running Magic events and had become certified according to the requirements that existed at the point they entered the program. Those requirements always included some sort of a test, although the nature of that test varied over the years, and some form of interview, which also changed somewhat, along with a few other requirements related to judging experience and willingness to mentor others, and some other things. Wizards had some say in what the requirements were for each level, but the program leadership largely handled the practical implementation themselves. A big shakeup happened about 4 or 5 years ago when a judge got hurt while working at an event. See, in the United States, there are laws that say that if you get hurt on the job, then your employer bears some liability for your medical bills and lost wages in case the injury prevents you from working. Even though the judge who got hurt wasn't one of the program leaders who had a contract with Wizards, there was enough circumstances that pointed to an employer-employee relationship between judges and Wizards to put this case in front of a judge. I'm not that kind of a judge, so I don't really understand a whole lot about the details, except that this case must have been really scary to the lawyers of the coast, because after that, they took a lot of steps to make sure that the judge program was a completely separate entity. The name of that newly created entity was Judge Academy. And for the most part, they continued doing all the stuff that the old program did in largely the same way, but there were a couple of major differences. The first was that Judge Academy made a commitment that they would not take anyone's work for free. The old judge program had a large number of projects that were primarily or completely covered by volunteer labor. And to their credit, Judge Academy actually stuck by this, at least as far as I'm aware. The second was money. If they were going to pay for stuff, they would need to get money from somewhere, right? And of course, that somewhere was the members. Up until Judge Academy, being a judge was free, and now it would require an annual fee of up to a few $100s depending on what level you were. The fee structure and the benefits that you got from it changed a couple of times over the history of Judge Academy, but that was another really big change. And also, we weren't getting any money from Wizards anymore. See, as much as judges like to complain about how little support we got from Wizards, they were still a pretty substantial amount of money that they gave to the program. Given the circumstances surrounding the inception of Judge Academy, though, that wasn't going to continue. Why am I telling you all this history? It's not to bash anyone involved with Judge Academy or the older version of the program, but it is important to understand this context in order to make sense of what comes next. For example, any proposed successor that relied on getting money from Wizards would probably not be feasible because such an arrangement has proved untenable in the past. And the judge program is definitely going to need money, at least for administrative and organizational expenses, which means that being a certified judge is almost certainly going to continue to require some sort of annual payment. With that context in place, we're almost ready to start examining what a potential successor to the Judge Academy might look like. There's one thing that we need to consider, which goes back to the question that I posed at the beginning of the video. What features does a minimal working example of the judge program have? First, we need to have some way to mint new judges and level up existing ones. There's a careful balance to strike between inclusiveness and quality here. For example, there certainly needs to be some minimum amount of knowledge that a Magic judge would need to have of rules and policy in order to function. The traditional way to prove that as a judge candidate has been an exam, but some people don't do very well in tests, and this anxiety might block an otherwise qualified candidate's application. The judge program has at times strayed too far in either direction of that scale in the past. A new judge program will need to address this question in such a way as to be fair to prospective candidates while not compromising the credibility of its members. The next thing that it needs is leadership. Someone has to be responsible for making these decisions that affect the program as a whole and gathering and administering its resources towards goals that are aligned with its mission. For example, the leadership would determine the criteria for becoming and remaining certified at each level. They might also organize judge conferences to further continuing education and fellowship among the members. If a judge is reported as displaying problematic behavior, the leadership would be responsible for investigating these reports and determining the best course of action, perhaps counseling this judge to improve in deficient areas or enforcing disciplinary actions. It's unlikely that just one judge would be doing all this stuff single-handedly. In the past, each of these areas would have a judge or perhaps a whole team in charge of it. The leadership would be in charge of determining which areas would be getting delegated like this and determining the process for which the people in charge would be chosen. In my opinion, this area has been one of the biggest weaknesses of the judge program in the past. One obvious problem is nepotism, in which the program leaders substitute personal relationships for merit in the process of determining who to share power and opportunities with. A more often overlooked issue is that of representation, which is somewhat ironic because the judge program has consistently espoused a commitment to diversity, but this is a very difficult task indeed. While the judge program has in general made great effort to ensure inclusion for members of historically underrepresented groups based on sex, gender identity, and sexual orientation, diversity of opinion is much more fleeting, and in general, the psychological profiles of members of the program's leadership tend to be very similar. It's common for judges to specialize in different judge skills, such that one might be strong in tournament logistics, another might favor mentorship, another community development. It's perhaps no surprise that the members of the program leadership tend to be regarded as experts in those sort of skills, whereas elites in areas like rules and policy knowledge or investigations tend to be comparatively rarer. Some of this is surely due to correlation, since politics probably appeals more to people who value skills like community building, but still I find it a little unsettling how important the ability to pass a DC-20 charisma check appears to be for inclusion in the program's leadership, especially when you consider what fraction of the program that this hidden requirement effectively excludes. A new judge program will need to face the challenge of choosing representatives and competent leadership in a fair way. While there are certainly other things that the program will need to include, to me, providing a process to elect leaders and selecting requirements to achieve and maintain each level are fundamental. Everything else can be built upon these. I suppose it's also of interest to go over some of the things that the program might not do. For one, I think it's a common misconception that the judge program writes the rules. In reality, someone at Wizards has the title of Rules Manager, and this person is the one who physically updates the comprehensive rules and the Oracle with every set. There is a contingent of perhaps half a dozen others who are contracted to edit and review the proposed changes, and while it's true that many of these people have backgrounds as judges, this isn't really a requirement. This is the reason, for example, why I always wait until the new comprehensive rules is public before I make videos about new cards or especially new mechanics. I don't have any more foreknowledge about any of that stuff than any of you do. Another one that may surprise some people is staffing. In the past, the judge program had a website that was built and hosted by members of the judge program, which allowed tournament organizers to advertise openings to judges to apply to those events. Judge Academy announced that they would not be using this existing tool, but would pay a developer to create one with similar functionality. Unfortunately, delays in creating a workable project drove many major tournament organizers to create their own in-house solution in the interim. Most of these settled on a model where judges would apply to events by filling out a Google form, and then those who are accepted would be notified by email and added to a Discord server that the organizer uses to communicate event-specific information. Now, all the organizers have their own in-house solution, and because of that, it's unlikely that any of them would go back to a common platform hosted by the judge program, even if the original one came back. This is unfortunate for judges because now we can't check one centralized location to see the dates of upcoming events. We need to join a different Discord server for each organizer we work for and check them individually, which can be up to half a dozen or more, depending on your location and travel radius. At times of transition, when the future is uncertain, it's a little bit natural to have some trepidation. So to close out, I'm going to do something I don't normally do on this channel and tell you my personal feelings on the future of judging. The judge program is always changing and evolving, but it will always be here. As long as the comprehensive rules of Magic are 250 pages long, in-person tournaments will require judges. And there will always be in-person tournaments because as much as Wizards might want to push everybody onto their digital platforms, Magic will never be as good of an online game as any of the myriad other games in the same genre that were specifically made from the start to be played online or on mobile devices. But the good news here is that face-to-face gaming offers something that you can never get online, a fact that even some other TCGs pay respect to with their very names. When the inevitable changes happen, this thought helps keep me grounded and helps me look forward to the future with hope. I've been judging for over a decade now, and I plan to continue as long as tournament organizers will continue to hire me. I see no reason, even now, to think that this won't be several more decades to come. But that's all I have for you today. How are you doing? Join me again next time for another Daily Ruling. But until then, I hope you have a great day.